By dawn, my yard had a shoreline. The HOA called it minor pooling. I called it a crime scene, and I brought a camera. The rain did not sneak. It announced itself in muscular sheets that slapped the windows and made raucous music of the gutters. By morning, the street was matte black glass, and when I stepped from the porch, the yard swallowed my boots. The border at the back, where our lawn met the HOA's green common, had disappeared. Last week it had been a shallow swale and a concrete culvert that whisked stormwater to the retention pond. 2 days ago, a landscaping crew had filled the swale with sod and covered the culvert's mouth with new turf to clean up the look. The email from Marlene, our HOA president, had been chirpy. We've improved aesthetics without changing drainage. Now the sod floated like sodden rafts, and the water didn't know where to go. The dog whined behind the sliding door. A soccer ball bobbed out from under the deck and drifted toward the fence like a tiny moon. I sloshed to the spot where the culvert should have yawned. Ivy, mud, and a neat seam of grass. No opening, no relief. My phone buzzed. Eddie from 2 doors up. You seeing this? If he was seeing it from uphill, my yard was the bowl. I called Marlene. Good morning, she answered, voice bright. How can I help? My yard is a lake, I said. The improvement blocked the culvert. There have been unprecedented rains, she replied. Our contractor assured us drainage was accounted for. This isn't accounting, I said. Water needs an exit. We'll take a look Monday. It's Saturday. Yes, she said, as if that settled the weather. I hung up and stood in the cold water until I felt foolish. Somewhere, a transformer popped and then settled again. The air smelled like iron and uprooted things. Eddie came around the side gate in knee-high rubber boots, a length of PVC under his arm. Gonna try to siphon, he said, nodding at the filled-in swale. Then, document everything. Photos, video, timestamps. They'll tell you you're overreacting. He didn't say, you'll doubt yourself. He didn't have to. I opened the camera and took a shot of the fence line vanishing into brown water. I crouched and zoomed in on the neat sod seam where the culvert had been cut and capped. I filmed. The hydrangeas bowing, the mulch islands, the drowned outlet under the deck. I made a folder and named it Flood, which felt dramatic and also like putting a lid on panic. The sun broke through for a minute and turned the water into a mirror. Clouds drifted there, broken and serene, while the real sky above them kept spitting. For a second, it was beautiful. Then the HOA's white SUV pulled up, and out stepped Marlene in immaculate sneakers, clipboard in hand like it could part the water. Just having a look, she said, picking her way along the common. Her hair ignored the weather. You closed a culvert, I said. That swale was there for a reason. We made improvements. The ditch was unsightly, a hazard. It was a function, not a flaw. I understand this is upsetting. We're all homeowners. Exactly, Eddie said, tapping the sod. You don't mess with drainage, she promised the contractor. Would call, smiled, and left. I went inside and laid towels along the sliding door track like sandbags on a student budget. The dog paced and huffed at the glass. In the hall closet, binders bloomed with our life, closing documents, warranties, tax returns, all the proof of trying to be a responsible person. Argument is a liquid, I thought. If I didn't contain it, it would get everywhere. So I contained it. I wrote the time, the rain gauge reading, the names of who said what. I noted the smell, the sound of tires tearing the flood at the curb, the way the peach tree leaned like it was listening. I texted myself a list: call county stormwater, pull HOA bylaws, find old photos of the culvert, check insurance. I added a reminder to breathe. Then I went back out and kept filming, because sometimes the only way to keep from drowning is to measure the water, to turn fear into frames and anger into captions that won't wash away. I didn't know then how long I'd need it. I only knew This. They could call it minor pooling. They could call it an act of God. I would call it what my photos showed, and I would not stop naming it. I pressed save again, twice. The next morning, the flood moved indoors. Not the water, the worry. It lapped at the baseboards of my mind, and I started sandbagging with facts. I didn't sleep so much as keep watch. Every time the rain softened, I tiptoed to the slider, counting the inches between the waterline and the door track like I could negotiate with it. By dawn, the lake had withdrawn a grudging foot, leaving a fringe of silt like a ring in a drained tub. The dog nosed the glass and whined, as if we'd both been grounded by the principal. "Coffee," my wife Lena said, handing me a mug. She had the face she wore for parent-teacher conferences and fevers, focused, tender, a little tired. "What's the plan?" "Document," I said. "Call the county, pull the covenants, find old photos. Send the HOA a certified letter so they don't forget our conversation." She nodded. "I'll dig through the photo archive." She kissed my shoulder, a quiet vote of confidence that I didn't know I needed until it landed. I started with the bylaws. The binder had that dry paper smell of rules that think very highly of themselves. I flipped, fingers skimming bolded headings like courtesy, architectural approval, pets. Then easements. There it was in the careful legalese that tries to be invisible. No owner or the association shall obstruct drainage easements or interfere. With designed stormwater flow, my highlighter squeaked. I photographed the page. I tagged the photo, easement, clause 7.4 JPG. Naming things was a ritual now. On the county website, after wading through the labyrinth of maps and disclaimers, I found a plat overlaid with easements like ghost roads. A light blue band ran exactly along the back fence line, stormwater drainage easement. I printed it and circled our lot, the swale that was no more. Right there, a public promise on plain paper. Eddie texted, "I've got the contractor's truck on my camera from Thursday. Timestamp 9:03 a.m. Sending." The still image popped up, 2 guys unloading sod by the culvert. The mouth was visible then, black circle in a concrete head wall. I scrolled to my own footage from Saturday. The same spot, a green seam. Mouth, then no mouth. Before and after, simple as a fairy tale with an obvious villain. I dialed the county stormwater hotline and left. A message that sounded steadier than I felt. "Hi, this is..." I gave my name and address. "Our HOA landscaping contractor appears to have filled a swale and blocked a culvert in a recorded drainage easement. We have active flooding. I have documentation and can email files. Please advise." I spelled my email twice. Next, I wrote to the HOA board and the management company, subject line in caps like a flare, urgent, drainage easement obstruction causing flooding. I pasted photos, embedded the plat, quoted their own rules. I kept my tone polite because rage feels good, but proof works better. I requested immediate remediation and asked them to refrain from altering, covering, or tampering with the area until the county could inspect. Lena found photos from the spring, when the kids had hunted for frogs in the ditch after a rain. A little green face peered from the culvert mouth like a witness. She printed those too. The kids padded in, hair smashed flat from sleep, bodies lean and warm. They pressed noses to the glass, solemn. "Can we still have the picnic at the park?" "Today?" our daughter asked. "Maybe at the dining table beach," I said, and we laid out a blanket between chair legs and ate grapes with the smell of wet world drifting through the slider crack. By noon, the HOA replied. From Seth, the property manager I'd met once when my mailbox door lost a screw. "Thank you for your email. Our contractor assures us no drainage functionality was impaired. The significant rainfall is a factor. Improvements were approved by the board." He suggested that I consider a French drain on my property to manage backyard saturation and attached a brochure as if handing a bandage to a bullet. Lena read over my shoulder. They really said improvements again. Her laugh had no joy in it. I called our insurance carrier. After a menu and a hold that made an hour feel like a commodity you only notice when you spend it, an adjuster with a gentle voice told me exactly what I suspected. We're very sorry for the situation, but rising water from outside is considered flood. That's excluded unless you have a separate flood policy. So if my neighbor builds a dam that sends water into my living room, that's an act of God? It would depend on the circumstances, she said, and I could hear her training bridle the words. If there's negligence by a third party, you may pursue them. Negligence. A word with edges, Eddie knocked with a paper bag. Sandbags, he said. Dog food sacks. Not pretty, but they stack. We built a low wall along the inside of the slider, a ridiculous thing that made us feel less ridiculous. He told me Ms. Alvarez down the block had standing water over her rear patio, that the retention pond was so full you could hear it swish against its own banks. They changed flow. It's obvious. That night, I wrote more. I logged minutes. I updated the folder. I drafted a certified letter to the HOA and the management company, citing the easement, the evidence, the immediate harm. I requested they cease and desist from further alteration, restore the swale and culvert, and coordinate with the county. I CC'd our street's email list. It felt like flipping on a light in a room where something scurried. Responses trickled. Priya from the corner sent a video of water seaming under her fence like a zipper. Tom shared a photo from last summer. Kids riding bikes along a dry, useful ditch. Ms. Alvarez wrote, Mi patio es una piscina. The chorus built, not loud yet, but there. Monday morning, as the sky rehearsed more rain and my inbox bloomed. With polite evasions, an unfamiliar number rang. This is Darren with County Stormwater, the voice said. I read your message. I'm on my way. My hands stopped shaking. Proof had invited an adult to the scene. And this time I'd be ready with everything I had. He arrived with a level and a quiet that made the water pay attention. Darren wore an orange vest and the kind of calm that rearranges panic. He shook my hand like we were starting a project rather than standing in a puddle that had swallowed half my yard. He scanned the fence line, the drifting sod islands, the neat seam where the culvert should have gaped, and nodded once in that way people nod when they've seen the same mistake before. You're the one who called, he said. Good. You kept records? I handed him a folder like a student presenting a thesis. Printed plat with the stormwater easement highlighted, screenshots of the bylaws with the no obstruction clause, Eddie's time-stamped contractor photo, my own before and after shots. He flipped, whistled very softly. You did my work for me, he said. Let's take a look. He knelt by the seam of new sod, pushed his finger in, and the turf wrinkled like a bad toupee. He pulled a pocket probe, a slender steel wand, and sank it into the earth. A foot in, it hit something solid with a hollow ping. Head wall, he murmured. He probed left, then right. They covered the mouth. I felt oddly vindicated, and also nauseous, like winning an argument you never wanted to have. They told us it was an improvement, I said. Improving the look is not the same as improving the function, he replied. He set a tripod, leveled a little green bubble, and sighted a grade from my deck steps to the fence line. Back pitch to your house now that the swale's gone, he noted. That'll do it. Eddie came around the gate, doffing his cap as if this were church. Darren nodded to him, then called someone. Yeah. Hey, it's Darren. Need a crew. And a saw at... He gave our address. Easement obstruction. Culvert capped with sod. Active flooding. Yep, today. Within 20 minutes, a county truck eased to the curb, men hopping out with shovels and a concrete saw that sounded like a promise. Marlene's white SUV arrived at the same moment, and she stepped out with her clipboard and her bright, efficient smile. There's no need, she trilled over the saw like anyone could hear her. We have a contractor. You have an obstruction in a recorded drainage easement, Darren said, voice level. County statute prohibits that. We'll be issuing a notice of violation to the association and the contractor. Today we're restoring function. She looked at his badge, then at me, and something that wasn't a smile tightened her mouth. We were addressing safety concerns. Children could fall in the ditch. Children can't fall into a ditch you mow flat, Darren said, not unkindly. But they can play in a yard that drains. Stand back, please. The saw bit the seam of sod. It coughed dirt and flung a strip aside, exposing busted concrete and the black, round mouth of the culvert like a throat cleared at last. The water responded with a gulping sound, then a slow, relieved pull. I watched the level in the yard drop a half-inch, then another, and felt tears surprise me. The dog wagged so hard his whole body sloshed. They opened the mouth fully, pulled. Away the turf and the mud someone had tamped there, and the flow grew visible, a brown ribbon drawing toward the pond instead of my slider. Darren took photos, before, during, after, a sequence like a confession. He flagged the edges with orange tape and set a temporary grate. "You'll still need the swale restored," he said, scribbling on a clipboard. "I'm citing the HOA. They'll have a compliance deadline. I'll CC you." Marlene's smile reappeared, brittle as a Christmas ornament. "We'll consult our counsel," she said. "We don't believe we violated anything." Darren tapped the plat I'd printed. "This blue strip is a promise. You broke it." Neighbors drifted to our fence like tide birds. Priya with a baby on her hip, Tom still in paint-splotched pants, Ms. Alvarez with her phone held up, filming. The little crowd hummed with relief and anger. "Gracias," Ms. Alvarez told Darren. "Mi patio." She made a flat-handed wave at ankle height. "We'll get it down," he said, and he did. The water kept drawing and the yard's mirror thinned, showing grass again, battered but there. For the first time in days, the air smelled like dirt instead of drowning. After the crew left, Darren handed me a card with a case number and a line direct to his desk. "Keep documenting," he said. "Log rainfall, screenshot forecasts. If anyone touches this area, film it. And if you get any pushback, call me." "Pushback?" I said, and it came out foolish. He just raised an eyebrow. He'd seen HOAs. That afternoon, an email landed, "Notice of violation. Immediate action required." The county's letterhead gave me a petty thrill, like a grown-up had. Joined our side in a playground fight. It listed the code section, described the obstruction, ordered restoration of the swale and culvert to pre-existing design, and set a deadline. It mentioned penalties. It CC'd the board, the management company, and me. 3 hours later, a different email arrived from the HOA. Notice of open board meeting to discuss recent weather event. Recent weather event, like a meteor had, filled in a ditch. Still, it was something, and we went. The clubhouse smelled like lemon cleaner and compromise. Folding chairs faced a long table where the board sat under a framed watercolor of the retention pond in docile weather. The room filled, Eddie across the aisle, Priya passing out copies of the county letter like a program, Tom rolling out a laminated copy of the plat like a map to a treasure we'd been standing on. Ms. Alvarez clutched a stack of photos in a Ziploc bag. Marlene called the meeting to order with a gavel as if the sound could anchor authority. She spoke of unprecedented rains, of cosmetic improvements meant to enhance property values, of how we were a community that solved problems together. Then she suggested forming a drainage committee, a study, an independent hydrologist. Time. I stood when they opened the floor. My voice shook, but I had paper and paper steadies. I read the clause from the bylaws. I held up Darren's notice. "This isn't a study," I said. "This is cause and effect. You altered an easement. Our yard's flooded. Restore the swale." Eddie spoke, simple and true. "You don't mess with water." Ms. Alvarez's eyes shone as she showed her photos. Her patio, a shallow lake, her mother's wheelchair marooned in the doorway. Priya translated a neighbor's soft, urgent Spanish. A murmur rose. Not a mob, a tide. The board nodded in unison like a set of dashboard bobbleheads. "We will review," Marlene said. "We will seek legal advice." She looked at me when she said legal, like it was a dare. The next morning, an envelope appeared on my porch. A violation notice from the HOA. My trash can had been visible from the street for exactly 9 minutes after pickup. I held the paper, felt the heat rise in my chest, and then deliberately added it to the file. If this was how they wanted to play, I thought, then fine. Water wasn't the only thing I could channel. They cited me for 9 minutes. I answered by making every minute a witness. I taped the trash can violation to the inside of the flood folder and smoothed the crinkle with my palm. The absurdity of it steadied me. If they wanted to fight with paper, I would become paper. Thin, flexible, harder to tear than I look. The yard exhaled, but you could still hear water speak. A dehumidifier growled in the living room, a squat animal chewing damp. The dog slept beside it with his nose tucked into his flank, trusting the machine to do its work. Lena moved through the kitchen quietly, school newsletters and grocery lists, and a neon note about the science fair magneted to the fridge like a soundtrack of normal life. "I'll call around for an attorney," she said, sliding a plate of toast toward me. "We can't keep playing whack-a-mole with emails." Money, a shadow in the doorway, cleared its throat. "We'll figure it out," I said, feeling every angle of the word figure. I made my first formal records request to the association. Copies of board meeting minutes for the past year, the landscaping contract and scope of work, bids, emails between the board and the contractor concerning drainage. I quoted the owner inspection rights from the bylaws and gave them business days to comply. I delivered it certified and stood at the counter to buy the green return receipt card, the grown-up equivalent of a talisman. The management company replied promptly and emptily, "Thank you for your inquiry. We can schedule a records inspection next month. This is what stonewalling looks like in khaki pants." I forwarded the email to a new address in my contacts. Keisha Tran, attorney at law. Eddie had recommended her. "She helped my sister when her HOA tried to ban her ramp," he said, "and that was all the endorsement I needed. Her office was a narrow space above a barber shop, diplomas on one wall, a watercolor of a mangrove on the other." She shook my hand like she'd been mid-conversation with me for years. "Walk me through everything," she said, legal pad at the ready. I did. She interrupted with questions that were tiny tourniquets. Dates, names, exact phrasing, who was copied. I watched her build a lattice of logic where my feelings had been flailing. When I finished, she sat back, pen tapping. "You have several things," she said. "Negligence, nuisance, breach of covenant, and possibly negligence per se because they obstructed a recorded drainage easement. The county's notice of violation is helpful. Your documentation is gold. Do we have to sue?" The word felt like a boat I didn't know if I could sail. "We start with a demand and a preservation letter," she said. "We tell them to restore and regrade to the recorded design, to stop retaliatory fines, and to preserve all documents, texts, emails, change orders relating to the alteration. If they stall or posture, we file for injunctive relief. The goal is function, not a windfall." "Can they charge us their legal fees?" I asked. They hinted. "They can threaten," she said. "Whether they can collect is another matter and often requires a court order. Also, retaliation is unwise. We'll note it." We drafted the letters together at her small round table. The word preserve appeared a dozen times, a polite way of saying don't erase. Keisha sent them by certified mail and email with red receipts that would later feel like breadcrumbs. I left with a retainer agreement that made money cough again. Lena squeezed my hand when I told her the figure. "We'll cut where we can," she said. "What's the point of saving if not to use it when something matters? Darren called to say the county had posted a bright orange sign on the culvert. Do not obstruct, county easement. They haven't applied for any permits to regrade, he added. If they miss the compliance deadline, we start fines. His voice had a little grit in it now. He'd moved from helpful to invested. Neighbors trickled through my living room with statements and coffee cake. Tom brought a spiral, notebook full of dates in the tidy script of a man who measures his days by brushstrokes. Priya's husband printed time-stamped screenshots of the street camera on the corner, capturing the landscaper's wheelbarrows trundling toward the culvert and away again, lighter. Ms. Alvarez's daughter translated a declaration about the wheelchair stuck at the threshold while the patio drowned. We set out plates and pens and let the house become a small civic center. It felt like building a raft out of signatures. The HOA's lawyer arrived in my inbox 2 days later, letterhead embossed in a way that wanted to matter. Words like baseless and defamatory took up space. He floated the idea of assessing the association's legal costs to my account and called our records request overbroad. He referred to the flood as water intrusion related to weather. He CC'd Marlene. Keisha's reply was 3 paragraphs and a scalpel. She cited the easement, the county violation, the section of the covenants they'd violated, and the statutory right to inspect records. She observed that retaliatory fines could constitute bad faith. She ended with, if restoration is not commenced within 7 days, we will seek injunctive relief and attorney's fees. There was no thunder, just a barometric change. That night, Lena and I lay awake and talked in whispers so the kids wouldn't pick up the pitch of us. What if we become that couple everyone avoids at block parties? I asked. We already bring the good guacamole, she said. They'll manage. Then softer. Right is not the same as easy. On the 7th day, no sod had been peeled, no slope restored. The Orange County sign flapped in the wind like a warning ignored. Keisha filed the complaint and a motion for a preliminary injunction. I drove to her office so I could sign the verification in blue ink. The caption at the top of the page made something in me sit up straighter. My name v. the association. It felt like putting my hand on my own shoulder and saying, I've got you. A process server with 4 arms like rope paper toweled his hands and took the packet. Clubhouse at 6? He asked. They've got bingo. I nodded. An hour later, he texted a photo of the return of service, Marlene's signature a tight knot. Outside, the clouds stacked and considered us. I stood on the deck with the dog and watched the newly opened culvert do its quiet work and thought about courtrooms. Cool, orderly rooms where water is translated into paragraphs and promises. We had moved from weather to record. The next current would be judge and gavel, and I was ready to wade in. Courtrooms are dry riverbeds where language decides which way the water will run. We dressed like people who believed in process. Lena knotted my tie with fingers that smoothed more than silk. Answer what's asked, she said, echoing Keisha. Breathe between sentences. The kids hugged me like I was going somewhere brave. I slipped the flood folder, now a brick of tabs and receipts, under my arm. It had the heft of a tool. The courthouse smelled like cooling coffee and wood polish. All rise, the bailiff intoned, and we did, as if posture could make a current. Behave. Judge Halpern took the bench, glasses low on a nose that announced skepticism as a lifestyle. Keisha leaned in. This is a preliminary injunction, she whispered. Think of it as asking the court to put up sandbags until the case can be decided. The HOA's lawyer sat 2 tables over, animated eyebrows and an embossed folder that projected confidence the way cologne projects intent. Marlene was with him, jaw set and pearl earrings trembling. Whether from nerves or indignation, I couldn't tell. Darren sat behind us in an orange vest, toned down beneath a navy blazer. Eddie slid into the second row, hair still wet from a quick shower, a sign he had not intended to miss this moment even if it meant a towel in the truck. Counsel, the judge said, and Keisha stood. Her voice was low, collected, the tone of someone who respects water and statutes equally. Your Honor, we're here because the association altered a recorded stormwater drainage easement by filling a swale and covering a culvert, which diverted stormwater onto my client's property, causing active flooding. We seek an order requiring restoration to the pre-existing design, prohibiting further alterations without county approval, and enjoining retaliatory fines. Exhibits A through G are the plat, the easement clause from the covenants, before and after photos, the county's notice of violation, declarations from affected neighbors, and a video of water receding immediately after the county opened the culvert. She moved through those exhibits like stepping stones. The plat's pale blue strip glowed under the document camera. The bylaws sentence, "No owner or the association shall obstruct drainage easements," looked so plain it was almost embarrassed to be read aloud. The before photo. The culvert's black mouth, frog face visible. The after. A fresh seam of sod across a silence. Then the county's orange-lettered violation like a flare made into paper. The video played, the water lowering as if obeying a command. HOA counsel rose with a smile that tried for avuncular and fell short. Your Honor, this was an unprecedented rain event. The association, acting in good faith to improve neighborhood, safety and aesthetics, lightly covered an unsightly ditch. We didn't block flow, we merely enhanced the appearance. The county's actions were precautionary. Water receded because the storm abated, not because of any alleged obstruction. My client is already investigating appropriate long-term solutions. A court order now would micromanage board discretion and set a bad precedent. As for so-called retaliation, we enforce rules uniformly. The trash can incident was entirely separate. Judge Halpern pinched the bridge of his nose. Let's hear from the county. Darren took the stand like a man accustomed to speaking. Bad news plainly. He stated his name, title, years with stormwater. He described the probe hitting the head wall beneath sod, the grade pitched the wrong way, the immediate drawdown when the mouth was cleared. In my professional opinion, he said, the association's alteration obstructed an easement and impaired designed flow. The notice of violation reflects that. HOA counsel tried to nibble. Isn't it true, sir, that heavy rain can aid cause pooling even with functional drainage? Of course, Darren said, unbothered. But you don't cover a culvert mouth with turf for aesthetics and call it functional. And you don't fill a swale that was designed to carry water. I testified next. The oath felt like a small dam. Words contained, purposeful. I spoke about the morning I stepped into my yard and sank. The towels along the slider, the dog food, sack sandbags, the 9-minute trash can violation arriving like a wink from a bully. I kept to facts. Keisha's questions were handrails. HOA counsel's cross was clumsy, an attempt to paint us as dramatic homeowners chasing guillotines over puddles. You posted about this on your neighborhood email list, didn't you? He asked, as if community were a sin. I did, I said, because it wasn't just my yard. Ms. Alvarez took the stand, hands tight on her purse. She described her mother in the doorway, wheels stopped by water, the way standing made her tremble. No pudimos salir, she said. We could not go out. She looked at Marlene when she said it, and something flickered across the pearl-polished face. A shadow of a human moment, maybe. Or maybe it was the flicker of being seen. Keisha closed with law. Likelihood of success on the merits, she said, ticking through the factors. Irreparable harm, real-time flooding, loss of use of property. The balance of equities favors restoring designed flow. The public interest is served by compliance with recorded easements and county directives. The judge leaned back, templed his fingers, and watched the ceiling as if the answer might be written in the faint swirl of paint. He came forward. I don't adjudicate aesthetics, he said. I adjudicate compliance and harm. The exhibits show a recorded easement. The county issued a violation. The video shows water receding when an obstruction was removed. I find the plaintiff has met the standard. He read from his notes, the words becoming a current strong enough to move us. The association is enjoined from obstructing the drainage easement and shall, within 14 days, restore the swale and culvert to their pre-existing design or an equivalent engineered design approved by the county. The association shall refrain from imposing fines or taking enforcement action against the plaintiff or testifying neighbors for non-safety-related alleged violations pending further order. The association shall produce the requested records for inspection within 5 business days. Bond is set at $100. Marlene's pen stopped its nervous clicking. HOA counsel wrote something fast and slanted. I exhaled for the first time in, it seemed, a season. Sandbags of words stacked into a wall that held. In the hallway, counsel approached. "We'll comply," he said, a sentence like a truce flag. Marlene hovered, a smile trying to find a place to land. "It was never our intention to cause distress," she said. "We're all neighbors." Neighbors, I thought, but also parties. "Restore the swale," I said. "Then we can talk about neighbors." Outside, the sky was an indifferent blue. Eddie clapped my shoulder. Lena pressed her forehead to mine in a small private celebration that felt like standing in a newly dry doorway. The culvert's mouth at home would still be doing its quiet work. Soon, if the order took root, the whole length of our back fence would breathe again. We had asked a court to tell water where to go, and for once it felt like something might flow the way it was meant to. The first rain after the order felt like a verdict you could watch from a kitchen window. It began the way honest things begin, without fanfare. A thin seam of gray lifted from the west, the kind of rain that speaks in syllables. I stood at the slider with a coffee and watched it stitch the yard. The new swale, cut clean as a smile, received it. The culvert's mouth, no longer a rumor under sod, but a dark, round certainty framed in riprap, took the water in like a throat made for the word yes. When the county crew came back to supervise the restoration, they brought stakes and string and a laser level like a quiet red star. The contractor, different shirts and faces this time, pulled up the offending turf and carved the channel with a care that read like penance. Darren moved along the line, calling gentle orders. "1/4 inch per foot," he said, and the trench obeyed. They lined the swale with erosion mat, tamped gravel, set a grate over the culvert that could hold a small parade. Eddie leaned on the fence and nodded approvingly, the way men nod at engines that finally sound right. Marlene came too. She had swapped pearls for simple studs and said little, which turned out to be the right amount. She watched as the swale took shape, as the water found it, as the grade changed the sentence of the ground. When Ms. Alvarez brought out paper cups of lemonade like a ceasefire offering and pressed one into Marlene's hand, the president accepted it with a small, tired thanks. Something human threaded the space between us, not forgiveness exactly, but a draft of air that wasn't just weather. Keisha and I met the management company in a conference room that smelled like toner and quiet. They produced records in bankers' boxes, as the order required. It felt like trick-or-treating for facts. We sat under a print of a lighthouse that had never watched a storm and read. The emails were equal parts banal and damning. A chain with the subject line, "Clean Look," where a board member wrote, "Let's get rid of that ditch before the summer picnic." A reply from the landscaper, "We can sod over the culvert mouth to make it uniform." A note from Marlene, "Do it quickly, please. No need to loop in the county if it's just cosmetic." Someone asked, "Is that allowed?" And the question died of neglect, buried under a thread about banner colors for the Fall Fest. There was also the trash can, an email from the management assistant, "Please issue minor violation to my address." It reminds him we notice. A winking emoji that made my teeth ache. Keisha slid that printout into a plastic sleeve, with the tenderness of someone preserving a pressed leaf. "Bad faith," she said softly, and the words made a small, satisfying click. The settlement came together not with fireworks, but with the practical clicks of ballpoints on paper. The association agreed to reimburse us for the dehumidifiers, the damaged fence panels, the lost shrubs, and a portion of our attorney's fees. They adopted a resolution: no work within any recorded easement without county review and written approval. They rescinded the trash can violation, apologized in writing for any distress caused, and committed to annual stormwater maintenance certified by a third-party engineer. The judge entered the consent order with a nod that read, like a benediction for people who prefer rules to shouting. The annual meeting was standing room only. Priya had a baby on one hip and a stack of proxies on the other. Tom brought a laminated copy of the plat, his personal banner. Eddie wore a button-down, which startled everyone. We spoke not in anger, but in sentences that had survived weather. "We need a board that sees function as beauty," Priya said, and the room hummed. Marlene took the microphone. "I made a mistake," she said. The simple past tense hung in the clubhouse like an unhooked ornament. "I thought I was tidying." "I didn't listen. I'm stepping down." There was no applause, just a soft exhale that felt more respectful than clapping. We elected people who knew how to read maps and also how to listen. Priya, Tom, and a retired civil engineer named Grace who smiled like her name. They asked me to chair a new committee, easements and infrastructure, and I said yes, because there are some sandbags you keep stacking even when the river is low. We wrote a one-page policy in plain language and taped it in the clubhouse. Water has a job. Don't get in its way. The first test after the fix came a week later, a proper summer thunderstorm that squared its shoulders and spoke with its chest. I stood in the doorway with Lena and the kids, the dog trembling with the joy of having a weather. The rain hit, applauded, ran, the swale filled and flowed, the culvert pulled. The yard glistened and then exhaled. The waterline held a full boot's width below the slider. We cheered. It felt silly and also like the right liturgy. Ms. Alvarez's mother rolled out onto her patio on the second dry day and lifted her face to the sun. "Gracias," she called across the fence, and we lifted our hands like flags. Eddie thumped my shoulder. "Told you," he said. "You don't mess with water." Then, softer, like a postscript he believed in now more than ever. "Or neighbors." I kept the flood folder, but I made a new one too. After. The first photo was the swale on a bright morning, dragonflies hovering like blue punctuation. The second was a frog, smug in the culvert mouth, witness restored. I wrote up a "how we did it" note for the neighborhood list. How to find your plat, highlight your easements, frame your photos, call your county, ask the right questions without setting yourself on fire. People forwarded it. Someone printed it and stuck it on the clubhouse corkboard with thumbtacks the color of candy. Some evenings now, when the light is right and the dog is sane, we take our dinner outside. The kids sit cross-legged on the deck, throwing grapes to test gravity in a strictly controlled study. The swale sings a low, private song, the kind you only hear when you're not listening for disaster. I keep taking pictures, but there's mud under my nails and less worry in my throat. The truth is, water remembers. So do we. And if a sentence can hold back a flood, it's because people wrote it, and people showed up to read it out loud, together. The culvert watches, an eye that doesn't blink. The yard breathes. We live here. We learned. And when the next rain comes, as it always does, we'll be ready to call it by its right name and let it go where it should. If this story resonated, please subscribe, like, comment, and share. It helps more neighbors find it.